Mi pero alcanzo lo que mi esposo no logró en 10 años, y transformó mi vida. The piercing ring of the alarm clock shattered the stillness of the room, with my eyes shut. I lazily extended my hand and switched it off. I longed to linger a bit longer in bed, yet it simply doesn't add up. The routine remained constant, unyielding. As though my existence were ensnared in a perpetual loop. I rose gradually and made my way barefoot to the kitchen. The tiles beneath my feet were cold, sending a slight shiver through me. I crafted coffee with precise, deliberate motions. The scent of freshly brewed coffee was one of the rare comforts that remained with me. As I filled my cherished cup, a blue ceramic piece adorned with golden edges, the sound of the shower water cascading reached my ears. My husband, Alejandro, was preparing to head out. As always, he rushed through it, fiddling with his tie in front of the mirror while glancing at messages on his cell phone. He took a quick sip of coffee without even glancing my way, left the cup in the fridge, illuminating the duration of my absence from genuine connection. I lost track of how long we lingered in this moment, but for the first time in ages. However, that night, as I lay in bed, my mind was consumed with thoughts of what I had expressed. For, beneath it all, he was indeed correct. My dog grasped my feelings more profoundly than he ever could. The following morning, the routine was once again repeated. Alejandro departed ahead of schedule, the door shut with a definitive thud. As I turned my head, there stood Bruno. He made no requests whatsoever. He didn't seek the spotlight. He simply bided his time. A knot twisted in my stomach. Something within me had shattered long ago. I always believed that it was love that bound us together. However, I now believe that the sole factor binding us is the routine we've established. Bruno inclined his head, as though seeking comprehension. I smiled with a hint of sorrow. At times, I feel like I share more insights about you than I do about him. I extinguished the cigarette in the ceramic ashtray and leaned my head back against the chair. The breeze brushed against my skin, yet rather than bringing relief, it settled like a heavy burden on my chest. It felt as though the very atmosphere was attempting to nudge me towards a truth I was reluctant to face. It was a realization that had lingered in my mind for quite a while. That night, as I stepped into the room, Alejandro was already sprawled on his back, the glow of his cell phone casting light on the ceiling. I fell. Amidst the stillness of the sheets, I refrained from reaching out to him. I hadn't engaged in it for months. Bruno lay in his bed, adjacent to mine, yet his eyes stayed wide open. Me as well. That night, I came to a realization. The issue was not merely that Alejandro and I had lost all common ground. The issue lay in his apparent lack of awareness. And to make matters worse, he was indifferent as well. The days went on, each blending into the next with an unchanging sameness. Yet, something within me no longer belongs. I sensed it in the way my fingers danced over the fabric of my skirt while I sat on the terrace, in the way my breath quickened when I gazed at Bruno and discovered in his eyes a depth of understanding I had never encountered in Alejandro's. And above all, I sensed it in the growing void within me. One afternoon, after picking up some shopping, I paused in front of a lingerie boutique. I had never experienced the urge to step into one before. Alejandro scarcely noticed what he applied to me or ceased applying altogether, yet, on that day, I remained captivated by the reflection of the chandelier. The mannequin donned a set of black lace with sheer elements, elegant yet daring. Something within me stirred to life when I laid eyes on it. It was not longing, it was a wistful remembrance. A longing for the woman who once was. Of the woman who yearned to feel cherished. Before I could overthink it, I stepped into the store. The delicate fabrics glided through my fingers as I explored the choices. I paused before a red lace body adorned with floral embroidery. One of those pieces that clings to the skin like a second layer. I envisioned it pressed against me, the striking contrast of the camise against my bare skin. I trembled, not due to the chill, but from an unsettling feeling within. I made the purchase impulsively. Upon arriving home, I secluded myself in the bathroom and gave it a try. The mirror showed a woman I didn't completely recognize. My curves were accentuated by the delicate fabric, and my lips, slightly parted, had a unique luster. I softly touched my arms, and for the first time in years, I felt a sense of beauty within me. Not for Alejandro. For myself, that evening, Alejandro showed up late, as per usual. I lay in bed, feigning interest in a book, while the crimson form remained concealed beneath my satin robe. Upon entering the room, he didn't even glance at his cell phone. "Good evening," he said in a flat tone. I chose not to respond. I lingered, hoping he would glance my way. That he would recognize the shift, that his eyes might brush over me with even the faintest hint of desire. However, he chose not to. He removed his shirt, left his cell phone on the table. Clarity washed over me. What held me in that house was no longer affection. It was dread, apprehension about departure. Apprehension about acknowledging that everything concluded a considerable time back. The following morning, I rose before dawn and set out for a walk with Bruno. The streets lay empty, and the crisp air invigorated my thoughts. The fabric of my linen dress brushed against my legs as I wandered without purpose. I was unaware of how much time had passed as we walked, but eventually it dawned on me that we had arrived at the sea. I settled onto the sand, allowing the wind to weave through my hair. Bruno reclined beside me, his head comfortably resting on my knees. I let out a deep sigh and shut my eyes. Alejandro wouldn't have noticed that I had departed. He likely wouldn't even inquire about my whereabouts. That thought pained me more than anything else. Upon my return home, Alejandro occupied the kitchen, sipping his coffee while seemingly oblivious to my presence. "Did you depart ahead of schedule?" he inquired with indifference. "Indeed." I responded in a calm tone. He remained silent, not inquiring further. Bruno settled beside me as I sipped my coffee. The steam ascended gradually, fading into the atmosphere, and I realized that. "It seems as though you're the only one who reaches out to me," I whispered. It was ridiculous reflection, and at the same moment, it was not. That night, as I entered the room, I discovered Alejandro in bed, engrossed in his cell phone. I reclined beside him, sensing the gap that separated us, akin to two unfamiliar souls confined beneath the same fabric. I grasped his wrist softly. "Alejandro. He responded, his gaze fixed elsewhere. I gulped. "Do you recall the last time our lips met?" The inquiry lingered in the atmosphere. Alejandro finally lifted his gaze from the screen, and let out a whistle, signaling the moment. "What kind of question is that?" I became involved, allowing the fabric of my shirt glides over my skin. "It's straightforward," I murmured. "When was the last time you kissed me?" Not a hasty peck beforehand. Departing from home. A genuine kiss. Alejandro regarded me as though I were communicating in a completely foreign tongue. He opened his mouth to respond, but silence lingered instead. Due to his lack of recollection. That silence was the most excruciating response I could have encountered. I rose from my slumber in silence. I approached the mirror, taking in my reflection beneath the soft glow of the room's light. The dark shirt accentuated the shape of my back, the silhouette of my hips. My skin glimmered beneath the moonlight that slipped in through the window. I appeared stunning, however, not for him. For myself. Alejandro glanced at his cell phone once more. At that moment, the choice became unmistakable. The following morning, as Alejandro exited the door without a word of farewell, I made my way to the dressing room and retrieved a suitcase. Bruno observed me quietly, as though he possessed an understanding that transcended words. I placed the necessities within. Garments. Papers, my beloved fragrance. I halted before the bed, letting my fingers glide over the sheets that carried a scent of indifference. I inhaled deeply. After that, I grabbed Bruno's belt, secured it to his necklace, and proceeded to open the door. The morning air was invigorating. I inhaled deeply, sensing liberation wash over me like a gentle breeze caressing my skin. I chose not to glance back. The most detrimental action we can take is to wait for someone to transform, especially when that individual has already revealed their true nature to us. And I had waited far too long. The echo of my heels reverberated across the tiles in the hallway. I strode confidently, each heartbeat resonating like a drum in my chest. My suitcase trailed behind me as Bruno walked alongside, his gaze locked on the exit door. I chose not to look back. Because I understood that, if I did, I could falter, and I simply couldn't permit it. As the door clicked shut, an icy shiver coursed down my spine. It was not trepidation. It was certainty. It was the sensation of a chapter concluding with a decisive strike. I took a deep breath and descended the stairs. The morning sun enveloped the streets in a warm, golden glow. The world continued on, unchanged by my choice. However, for me, everything had transformed. I had no plan in place. I was uncertain about my next destination. However, if I were certain of anything, I would not return. I hailed a cab to a quaint hotel by the ocean. I was reluctant to return to my family's home, dreading the unsolicited advice, and the pity I could sense in others' gazes. I simply desired solitude, with me, accompanied by Bruno. The space was unadorned, featuring white linen curtains that fluttered gracefully in the wind. I placed my suitcase on the floor and settled onto the bed. One that I had purchased with the hope that Alejandro would regard me as he once did. Yet, he never did. I gazed at my reflection in the mirror. My hair cascaded in gentle waves over my shoulders. My lips held a subtle shade of red, and my skin radiated the glow of someone who had finally found their breath of freedom. I appeared stunning, and this time, it was solely for me. It was meant for me. I took a stroll along the shore, the chilly grain slipped through my fingers, while the briny wind gently brushed against my skin. Each step and every breath resonated within me.